The distress signal pulsed through the cold void of space, a desperate cry for help. It had been sent by the last survivors of the Ekran race, a once prosperous civilization that now teetered on the brink of extinction. Their planet, Zakar 9, had been overrun by a monstrous biomechanical force, the Zelnath, who consumed entire worlds in their unrelenting march across the stars. The Ekran had fought, pleaded, and finally fled, hoping for salvation from some benevolent force in the universe. They had calculated every probability, analyzed every faction within their reach, and sent their signal to the one species most capable of saving them. But they had not accounted for the Deathworlders. The humans arrived in a fleet of warships that darkened the system's star. No grand introductions, no diplomatic overtures, just the cold, calculated response of a species born from a planet that tried to kill them at every turn. The lead vessel, a massive dreadnought named Oblivion's Wake, sent a brief transmission. Received. Hold position. The Ekran, despite their advanced technology, had never seen a force quite like the Deathworlder fleet. The human warships were crewed by galactic standards, built for durability rather than elegance. Their hulls were scarred, their weapons overpowered, and their shields barely an afterthought. They relied on an overwhelming application of violence, an understanding that in war, the first rule was to kill your enemy before they could kill you. Captain Ilian, the highest-ranking Ekran official still alive, hesitated before responding. "This is Captain Ilian of the Ekran Exodus Fleet. We request immediate assistance against the Zelnath." The human commander, Admiral Cole, responded with a dry, almost amused tone. "Acknowledged." That was it. No further questions, no demands for compensation. The humans had received a distress signal, and they would answer it in the only way they knew how. Within hours, the human fleet began its descent into the system, their ships taking up positions with brutal efficiency. The Zelnath, sensing new prey, shifted their forces toward the newcomers. The Ekran had seen hundreds of species fall before the Zelnath, their technological superiority crushed under the weight of sheer, mindless destruction. But the humans did not react with fear. They did not attempt diplomacy. They did not run. They attacked. The first salvo came from the Oblivion's Wake, a concentrated blast that tore through the Zelnath's vanguard. The biomechanical monstrosities adapted quickly, forming a defensive phalanx to absorb the next strike. But the humans didn't fire the next strike from a distance. They charged directly into the swarm, their battleships moving with an aggression that defied logic. Ekran war strategists watched in horror as human vessels rammed into the enemy, point-blank weapon discharges vaporizing entire swaths of the Zelnath fleet. The battle unfolded in a way that defied everything the Ekran knew about interstellar warfare. While most civilizations preferred ranged engagements, using shields and energy weapons to chip away at enemies, the humans engaged in brutal close-quarters combat. Their ships bristled with kinetic weapons, railguns, and missile barrages that tore through the enemy, as though they were nothing more than fragile paper constructs. They adapted in real time, their commanders coordinating like apex predators, exploiting weaknesses the Zelnath didn't know they had. The Zelnath, for the first time in their long history, hesitated. Then they broke. The battle lasted 3 days, a relentless, punishing campaign that left the battlefield strewn with the wreckage of thousands of ships. The humans didn't stop until the last Zelnath vessel was nothing more than a drifting husk. And when it was done, when the echoes of war had faded into the void, Admiral Cole sent another transmission. Threat neutralized. The Ekran didn't know how to respond. Their own fleets had been systematically dismantled by the Zelnath over decades. They had sent a distress signal expecting assistance, perhaps some token military aid, but they had never imagined complete annihilation of their enemy within days. Captain Ilian, gathering his composure, responded, "You have our eternal gratitude. How can we repay you?" The answer came with a chilling nonchalance. "You don't." The humans didn't demand tribute. They didn't seek territory or political leverage. They simply turned their fleet around and prepared to leave, as if what they had done was routine, as if exterminating a galactic menace was just another day's work. Ilian pressed forward. "Then why help us?" Admiral Cole hesitated. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a species that had known suffering far beyond what the Ekron could comprehend. "Because we got the signal." And with that, the Deathworlders left, disappearing into the black void of space, leaving behind a stunned civilization that had just witnessed the terrifying generosity of humanity. The aftermath of the battle left the Ekron fleet adrift in disbelief. Survivors moved cautiously, salvaging what they could from their ruined homeworld. There was no cheering, no celebration, just the silent acknowledgement that their species had been spared extinction. But questions lingered in Ilian's mind. What kind of species simply answered distress calls with such brutal efficiency and expected nothing in return? The Ekron recorded every moment of the battle, transmitting it across surviving networks. Other species would see what had happened, and soon the name of the Deathworlders would spread across the galaxy. There would be those who feared them, others who sought alliances, and perhaps some foolish enough to test them. As the last human warship faded from sensor range, Ilian made a silent vow. The Ekron would not forget. They would rebuild, learn from what they had witnessed, and one day, perhaps, they would have the strength to stand beside the Deathworlders, not as frightened refugees, but as equals in the great and merciless void of space.